So welcome. This is the first lesson of our beekeeping for beginners, designed to help you learn the basics of beekeeping and give you, most importantly, the confidence in starting your beekeeping operation, I hope, this year. And perhaps if you're still wavering, I hope this course will end up convincing you that you should go ahead and do it. I don't want this course to say, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? Forget about it. So just I just hope that it will be a positive thing for you. I see some of you are drinking a glass of wine as well. Very good. I was just asking my wife this morning, maybe I should rebrand this really more formally as the Happy Hour Beekeeping course. Unfortunately, I think it wouldn't be good if I was sharing that with you right now. So let's get started. I'm going to hide. I've got all your images here, but I'm going to hide you all and take you here to my home screen. Before we do actually get started, I want to say that this course is designed to be dynamic. I want you to feel comfortable asking questions, jumping right in. If things aren't clear, interrupting me. That makes for a more dynamic and a real course. When I was doing a bit of research on doing this course, I noticed that other courses were available online, but most of them are just recordings, right? So which can be pretty, I think I'll say the word boring. Maybe perhaps they're more in-depth, more rigorous than what I'm offering. I don't know, but they're less engaging. I want this to be engaging, so please feel free to jump in at any time. Another thing I'd like to say is, I'll take you to the first slide here. Somehow it's off. There we go. I want to provide a caveat on what we'll be doing over these next 5 lessons. I want to make sure things are clear, your expectations are clear. What we'll be doing is providing you with a broad overview of beekeeping for beginner beekeepers. We will be doing it under a clear structure, so it gives you an idea of how to approach beekeeping, the kinds of things you need to learn and to know, what fits in what category of knowledge. So this will help you then to go on and continue your learning, because I suspect that at the end of this course, which is only 5 hours, you'll likely have a lot more questions than answers, but you will know what the right questions are. You will start knowing what to ask, and you'll be able to find that information with the tremendous resource that the internet is today. When I started beekeeping, I think I started with an old 1976 pamphlet that was published by the Ministry of Agriculture in Ontario, and that's what I had to go, and that was it. But today, with the tremendous resource we have online, it's amazing. And I shouldn't be saying this, but I don't even think you need to be taking this course. You'll find it all online, but I'm glad you decided to take it anyway. So, and finally, this course should provide you, as I said previously, the confidence to get started. That's what I want to do. Any questions? Very good. So I suppose we can start by we have to make sure we understand ourselves why we want to do this. People are motivated by different factors or different reasons to get into beekeeping. I've often thought about it myself. Am I doing it for the money? No, because then I would starve to death. Am I doing it for the fun? Yes, it's a lot of fun, but it's also part of a long tradition. Honey used to be the only source of sweetness but for humans for many, many years. If you look back, this cave painting on the right, it's from Spain, dates back about 20,000 years. It shows someone climbing some vines. This is just part of the painting. It's climbing some vines up into a cliff and reaching into a hole. There's bees flying around. This person has some type of container in which to put pieces of honey. And some people have even said this is probably a woman. Look at her shape. And if you look at it, the entire picture below, there's 2 or 3 other persons, and they look more like men. So they're sending the woman up there to fetch the honey and get stung. That was thousands and thousands of years ago. And on the left, it's a picture of in Egypt. Again, clearly bees. The Egyptians were beekeepers, and there's lots of reference to beekeeping back in the times of the Egyptian pharaohs. So it's an old tradition. If you want to get into beekeeping, you're joining a long brother and sisterhood of beekeepers. But there could be a lot of other motivations to do so. It's a hobby that can pay for itself. It's very rare that hobbies pay for themselves. I know, you know, play golf costs you a lot of money. You get anything back. A lot of fun, mind you, but beekeeping can pay for itself. There's a bit of money that you have to put out at first if you want to get into it. But, you know, within a year or two, you've easily got that money back if you're running your operation well. Perhaps you just want to commune with nature. I suppose probably some of you have a dog and you'll say one of the reasons you like to have a dog is because it forces you to go out on a walk every day. Well, when you have bees, it forces you to get out there and go outside and see how they're doing, do what it takes to make sure they're healthy and happy. And it helps you connect with nature. You're more attentive to the flowers that are blooming around you because it's important to your honey production. You're more attentive to the weather. So that's another reason another one of the pleasures you get from beekeeping. And also, if you keep bees, you'll find that it's a great icebreaker. I say a cocktail party here, but at any social event, a family reunions with your neighbors. Remember in the days we used to do that stuff. You know, you just say the word, I started getting into bees this year, and you'll be surrounded by people like bees around a drop of honey, asking you hundreds of questions about how you do it, well, what do the bees do in winter, how do you feed them, how do you get the honey out, and it's a great icebreaker. So, you know, that's another reason to do it. And finally, it's just a lot of fun. The beekeeping's a lot of fun. So there you go. Think about why you're doing this. If you're in it because I want to make some money and that's a business opportunity, well, it is a business opportunity. You can do it for the money, but also there's plenty of other reasons to do it, and all of them are valid. So let's get into honeybee biology. No question. Is that a question? Nope. Okay. Let's get into honeybee biology. And this is where Massimo might correct me. Honeybees are a social insect. Not very many insects are social, but honeybees are, just like ants and termites. They live in socially structured colonies. There's a division of labor between the different castes, or even different stages of a member of that colony's life. They will have different jobs. It's very well structured. These insects are divided into castes. The word caste is used when we talk about bees. So when we get to bees, there are 3 castes of bees, and you probably are familiar with them. The first one is the queen. You can see her there. Look at her. Before even I write this down, look at this insect, a beautiful insect. She does have a large abdomen there, golden abdomen in this case. Why would she have a particularly large abdomen? Does anybody venture a guess?
Eggs.
Very good. That abdomen is an egg factory. She could be laying 1,000 to 2,000 eggs a day. So, you know, they're not just stored in there waiting to be laid. She's making them. So it's a huge egg factory. And you will have typically 1 queen per hive. So she rules the roost. Back in the old days, I have an old beekeeper's book from the 1850s from the UK. And the writer back then who wrote about the bees talked about the king, not the queen. And all the worker bees were subservient to the king, and the king set the structure of the community. The writer really wrote with a British, monarchy, an ordered class society type of frame of mind. Is quite interesting to read. So there is 1 per hive, and they do live for several years, 3 to 4 years, even longer. The queen, it's amazing how long she could live. And she very rarely leaves the hive. She will leave the hive typically twice in her lifetime. Once to go out, fly and get mated, and another time if the hive decides to swarm. Otherwise, she stays in the hive. So what does she do? Well, we talked about it. She lays eggs. That's her main role. She also will establish new colonies, swarming. So we'll talk about that later. You could also say that she keeps the spirit of the hive together by her pheromones. So she releases pheromones, and the worker bees sense that there's a queen in there, and it helps them keep them under doing what they need to do, tend to the eggs, go gather honey and nectar. So she also plays that type of role without actually knowing. We have our worker bee. This one, look how much smaller she is, right? She's quite a bit smaller than the queen bee. This is a sterile female. She almost never lays eggs. We'll see later on in our course that there are circumstances in which she will lay eggs, although her eggs produce only males, and that's it. In a healthy hive, you might have 50,000 bees. That's quite a large number. So, you know, at that cocktail we're talking about, you can always throw around these figures. Yes, I have a herd. I keep some livestock. I have 50,000 head. And people will be quite impressed until you tell them it's bees. But that's a big number for one little hive. And these bees will live anywhere between a few weeks in the summer. In the summer, they work very hard. They're born, and as soon as they emerge out of their cell in the hive, they'll start working. The first several days of their lives, they're working inside the hive, tending to tasks that take place inside the hive. And as they get older, they'll start working outside the hive. They'll start gathering pollen and honey. And they work hard. They work themselves basically to death is what happens. It's what they do. It's what they're programmed to do. And the winter bees last a lot longer. In fact, the eggs that are laid at the end of the summer, early autumn, the bees that develop from those eggs are morphologically slightly different from the worker bees that develop over the summer. And they have different characteristics that allow them to live a longer life. Of course, they're not working as hard. They're staying inside the hive all winter long. So what do the worker bees do? They work a lot. So they gather nectar, pollen, and propolis. They feed and tend to the larvae inside the hive. They clean and defend the hive. They make wax. They build and repair comb. They ensure the hive climate control. They're quite busy compared to what the queen does. The queen just basically walks around and lays eggs. And we have the final cast, the drone. Now, if you look at the drone, we go back to the worker bee, look at the picture of the worker bee and look at the drone. So, you know, if you look at it quickly, the difference is, does anyone notice anything in particular that strikes you as different between the two?
Head.
Sorry?
The head?
Head, yes. It's the drone's head is almost all eyes. So it's like big eyes, whereas the worker bee has much smaller eyes. Why would the drone have such huge eyes? What does it need to see?
Danger.
Danger. Well, we'll touch upon that very quickly. So the drone is a fertile male. There's only several hundred, maybe 1,000 in a hive. The numbers fluctuate. And they're mostly present from spring to early autumn. I was visiting my hives just several days ago, and in the winter it's normal that bees will fly out and die in the snow, sadly, but it happens. And I saw some dead drones there. I thought very peculiar to have drones even in January. Usually there are no drones there this time of year, so I don't know what's going on in my hives right now. So you have a few, not very many, and the bees will make drones in the spring and keep them going and over the summer. And then when the fall comes, they stop making drones and they tend to kick them out of the hive. So what does a drone do? Any guesses out there? Pippa?
Mate the queen.
That's right. That's what they do. That's all they do, mate with the queen. Otherwise, they're just hanging out, eating honey, and whatever, waiting around, just like, you know, I was going to say, well, I better not get into any dangerous waters there. So why do they have big eyes? So they can spot the queen. So the way bees mate. What's that, Sue? I didn't hear you. All right. Well, if you're going to speak up so I can hear you. The way bees mate is they mate outside the hive, and on a nice sunny day, the drones from different hives will gather in places called drone gathering yards. They go, somehow they magically find these places. If you put several different hives out there, they will end up going to 2 or 3 different places, gathering there, and they're flying around. They're just flying around, hanging out. And should there be a queen that newly emerged from a hive requiring to be mated, she will also leave the hive and she will also find these places. And she'll fly through these clouds of drones, and the drones will race and mate with the queen. The queen will mate with up to a dozen different drones. And the drones, of course, as is the case in the insect world, sometimes they will then drop dead. That's it. As someone said, they die with a smile on their face. And the queen, once she's mated with a dozen or so drones, will fly back to the hive, and then she'll have enough. She'll have acquired enough sperm to last her all her life. She could be laying eggs for 5 years from that one mating flight. Now, this nice diagram shows the relative sizes and shapes of the different bees. The queen is well over a centimeter long, the centimeter and a half in this picture, whereas the worker is about a centimeter and the drone a bit bigger. The drone is a bit more like a tank. It's a bit more robustly built. And look at the eyes of the drone, right? Quite big. So we've talked about the 3 castes, about the queen who mates and gets fertilized, and then she gets back to the hive and starts laying eggs. So that's how the bee's life starts, as an egg. Big surprise there. And on the left, you see a picture of a honeycomb. At the bottom of each cell, of most of the cells, you'll see an egg, and here's a magnified view of that. It's like a tiny grain of rice. When you open up your hive, it's always a good thing to check for eggs, because if you see an egg, it means there's a queen who's been laying there fairly recently. But it's not always easy to find. Trust me, you're out in your hive, in your yard. You're probably, if you're reaching down into the brood nest where all the queen is and all the bees are, it's probably better to be wearing protective gear. And you're pulling that out. Could be a hot day, you're sweating, you have the gear on. It's not always easy to see those eggs. They're so tiny and the sun is shining and you have to hold it in the light. But it's something you need to learn how to do. So what happens to an egg? After 3 days, the egg hatches into a larva. Now, the larva is like the equivalent of a caterpillar stage for butterflies. I think in our popular culture, larvae like this, we think of maggots. We think gross. We think maggots in the garbage. But at the end of the day, a larvae is the same thing as a caterpillar, the same stage of life as when a butterfly lays an egg and it turns into a caterpillar. I think I was showing my bees to the kids last summer, and I would tell them, showing them these larvae, and I said, they're like caterpillars, but they're a lot smarter. And they would say, why are they smarter? Well, caterpillars, they have to walk around outside, they have to look for their food, and what do they eat? Leaves. Not very good. And they're in danger of birds and eating them. Whereas the bees, they're little caterpillars. They're born inside these little bowls, and they stay there. They're not in any danger. And then the bees feed them. They don't have to go looking around for food. And also, the bees feed them a nice, sweet mix of pollen and nectar. It's very tasty. So the caterpillars, the larvae have it pretty well. So in this particular slide, you see several, larvae of different ages. Here's a very tiny one between the heads of the 2 bees right there. That's probably just hatched a day or 2 ago. Then they quickly grow into big, fat, juicy larvae here. And these ones are so big, soon the bees will be capping this cell. They'll be covering it. And that's the equivalent of a caterpillar making a cocoon. Once it's covered, the larvae will metamorphosize. Let's look at the next slide. Here you see a picture of these pupae, so the caterpillar, the larvae has metamorphosized into the shape, a new body, a completely new body, looking like an adult bee. And here on the right is what it looks like from the outside. If you pull your frame out of the brood chamber, you'll see these capped cells. Underneath those cells is what you have here, those pupae. There's another, here you'll see a few more open cells with larvae that haven't yet quite been capped. And down here on the right, just for your information, you see some cells with some yellow stuff in there. That would be, can anyone venture a guess here? Pollen, right? So here's another nice picture of what you might find when you pull out a frame that's in your brood box. You'll see what we call a capped brood, very nice. Any beekeeper loves to see this kind of thing. It means there's a lot of bees going to be emerging from these cells soon. And more bees means more workers. More workers means greater capacity to bring in some nectar and make honey. In this particular slide, you see two different kinds of cap cells. You see these here, and then on the left, another kind. They're sticking out. You notice that? That's, those are two casts there. Here you have worker bees, and the cells are capped basically at the same level as the depth of the cell right here. They cap the surface and that's it. But because the drones are bigger, when they cap the drone cells, it's kind of like a bullet shape. It sticks out of the surface of the comb. And I see a picture.
Mark,
Go ahead.
Mark, it's Lisa. I just wanted to ask you, what determines, like, does the queen determine the gender, or the I don't know if you use gender for like, who decides whether it's going to be a drone?
The queen
or so she can
She
control.
controls if she's going to fertilize that egg or not. If it's not fertilized, it produces a drone. If it's fertilized, it produces a worker.
And she fertilizes it. Is that?
Yes, she managed to have one, sperm join the egg every time she lays an egg. She'll decide that. That's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And then for a queen, I guess she doesn't want competition, but there must be some queens that are born.
Well, when it's time, if they need to make a new queen, they can make a new queen. Any egg that's fertilized, a female egg, for a worker bee could be turned into a queen, anyone. So all those worker bees, they're just stunted queens. They're stunted queens. They haven't been fed correctly. So they didn't grow to full queen status. That's why the reproductive organs aren't quite developed. And so, but we'll talk about that shortly, okay?
Okay.
So
Yep, thanks.
Good question.
is it
This picture, I
accidental
wanted to show you also.
that all the drones are on one side and worker bees are on the other, or is that just the way it's always?
Yeah, that tends to be the case. The the queen will lay eggs in certain areas for drones and keep the worker bees together. Generally, there's always exceptions. In this particular picture, you do see some drone cells down below here on the right, but she tends to lay them in their respective areas. The drone cells are a bit bigger too, so the bees will make cells that are a bit bigger, right?
Why would the hive want more drones? Because they're just there to mate the queen?
Yes, it's typical when the season starts in the spring that they will be making drones, because in the spring and early summer is when swarms happen, and it's the interest of all honeybee colonies to have drones flying around out there in the drone yards, so that if their mating flights are happening, they'll have some drones with which to mate. So every hive will produce drones. Now, as a beekeeper, you don't mind seeing drones, but sometimes you feel, oh my God, they're making way too many drones, and then, we don't need that many drones. So you as a beekeeper, you can try to discourage them from making more drones. These drones emerge and they have to eat. If you have a couple thousand drones around and they're just eating all your honey, that's no good. These guys just taking it easy and eating up your crop. So there's, those are kinds of things you could do as a beekeeper to try to discourage too many drones. I was just going to point out in this picture, there is a cell here that has not yet been completely covered, right? So it's still open. You can see the larvae inside, just to show you the process that's happening there. Okay, then there are queen cells, as we were talking about a few moments ago. In this picture on the left, you see a few drone cells down on the bottom, and usually the drone cells are towards the bottom. And then you have a few covered worker cells, and then you have some queen cells that have been constructed here. And on the right, another picture of the queen cell. The queen cells always are arranged vertically, whereas the drone and worker cells are all horizontal. The queen cell is vertical. The queen cells are a lot bigger because the queen is a bigger cast, and they also feed her a lot. So just before they cap it, they'll feed it a lot. And they'll feed it royal jelly. And the royal jelly is the complete, rich, nutrient-rich food that they'll give the larvae to make sure it turns into a queen. With all the other bee casts, the drones and the workers, they'll feed them royal jelly, but only for a day or two at the beginning, to get them going, but then they're going to give them a much lighter diet as they finalize their growth, so they don't turn into queens. So if you see this in your hive, you open up your frames and you see this, you're saying, well, I got some queens coming, and that could be, that's something, could be something to worry about depending on the situation. We'll talk about that. So just to recap here, it's important as a beekeeper to understand the time frames involved as they develop. So this is for a worker bee developmental phase. So between when the queen lays an egg and when it hatches, it's 21 days. So you can tell, if you're visiting your hive and you see eggs, you'll know that the queen has laid that egg within the past 3 days. Because after 3 days, the egg hatches. And if you want to know if your hive is healthy, it's important to know that your queen is there and she's laying eggs. So if you see eggs, it's a good sign. You see just a few eggs, then you could be worried. If you see no eggs, then that's something to look further into. So if you see no eggs, but you'll see small larvae, well, you'll think, well, the queen has laid eggs, but not for the past 3 days. So something's going on. Why hasn't she laid eggs in the past 3 days? Is she dead? Is she sick? Has the hive swarmed and she's gone? Or is the hive preparing to swarm? These are the kinds of questions that the beekeeper will ask upon inspection and finding that there are no eggs but larvae. Or you may find no larvae, just capped brood. At that point, you'll say, wow, I haven't had a queen laying eggs here in 10 days. And that's getting a bit worrisome, right? Because if there's, that's a 10-day gap in the production of your workers. Remember, we said the workers, after 35 days, they live about 35 days. If you're not constantly replacing the workers over the summer during the honey, the nectar flow, then your hive is not going to produce, is going to miss out on the nectar, won't be able to bring it all in, and you won't have a good production of honey that year. So the larvae turns into a pupa. Between day 10 and day 21, the adult bee emerges. So that's for the worker bee. Now here's a diagram that shows you for each caste that there are various developmental phases. So on day 1, here on the left, the queen lays an egg, and the top one is for the worker, the middle is for the drone, and the bottom one is the queen. Look how the queen cell they've indicated upside down because it grows vertically, right? Vertically. So whereas for instance, the worker bee will be capped, its cell will be capped at day 9. For the drone, it's day 10. For the queen, it's day 7 or 8. So they feed her so much, the queen, that she quickly develops and can be capped to start her metamorphosis sooner than the worker bee or the drone bee. And the queen will emerge after 16 days, whereas the worker is 21 and the drone is 24. These are things to know. The drone is not that critical, but for people who get involved in queen rearing, some people do that. It's a business. As a beekeeper, once you've gotten the hang of managing your hives, just a year or two, you can consider getting into rearing queens, because there's a business in there. It's selling queens because queens die, or you want to replace an old queen, and there's a market there. People buy and sell queens. Okay, now we'll get into swarming. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Why do bees swarm? How do they do it? What are the signs? I caught my first swarm in my life just last summer. It was September, very late for a swarm, and I was taken by surprise. I was working on my bees. I was just kind of getting ready to finish the season, and I was on my last hive. I had 6 hives, and I turned around, and just there in a branch at shoulder height, just behind me, was a picture. This is not my picture, but it was very similar. A whole bunch of bees sitting in the branch right there. I was so excited. It's a very exciting thing to see and catch a swarm. So why do they swarm? Well, it's important to know that a honeybee colony in itself, the colony in itself is a single reproductive unit. It's not the individual. In humans and most animals, it's the human is a reproductive unit. A male gets together with a female and they make babies, and the baby itself is the single individual, which goes on to start a new, family and continues the whole process. But for bees, it's a different story altogether. The swarming then is how a colony reproduces. A single colony splits into 2. So whereas the individual worker bee and the queen are not necessarily the biological unit. The whole hive is the biological unit. So to reproduce, the hive one hive has to turn into two hives, and that's what swarming does. So increasing the number of colonies reduces the risk of extinction or local extirpation. I don't know if you know that word, but I did a biology degree. That's where I learned it way back then. Extirpation is kind of like a local extinction. So if you had, let's say you have one hive, one colony of honeybees on Prince Edward Island, and it dies out, you can say then honeybees have been extirpated from Prince Edward Island. They're not extinct because they exist elsewhere. So by increasing, if that hive in Prince Edward Island succeeded in swarming, then over the winter, there would be two hives. And the following summer, maybe they each would swarm again, so you'd have four hives. So that is how the honeybees reproduce. So that's what swarming is all about. It's a good thing. It's a natural thing. I guess we're led to believe that swarming is bad, that bees are out there, they're angry, but it's not at all the case. They're just doing what nature has programmed them to do.
Question.
When does it happen?
Well, I've got a couple of questions. So when they swarm, do you always have like another beehive on standby kind of thing?
Well, it depends on the kind of beekeeper you are. If you're like oh my God, they swarm, I'm not ready for that. What am I going to do? Or, yes, I'm very organized and I have all the equipment here waiting for such eventualities. If you would just have one hive and you get a swarm, you're probably not ready to house a second hive, right? Maybe you're not anticipating getting a second hive, a second colony, so you may not be ready. If you have, I have 6 hives, so when mine swarmed, I was able to gather some bits and pieces in the shed to house that swarm. So that's up to and also most of the time a swarm you lose it because it takes off. You may not be there when it happens, and it's gone in the wilderness. You'll never see it again. So it's pretty rare that you'll see one. Your hives will swarm. You'll see your swarm. You'll be able to catch it and put it back into a new hive. You had another question?
Yeah. So you mentioned that you saw your first swarm this year.
That's right.
So how long have you been beekeeping?
Well, that's probably, I kept bees for about 4 or 5 years. Then I stopped for a long time and I started again. So maybe a total of 10 years, 8, 9, or 10 years I've been keeping bees. Yeah, you're right. It's the first time I saw one swarm. And because I'm not always next to my bees, right? My bees are not where I live. They're out in the country. Okay. So my sister, who has a place out in the country, told me, I remember a couple of times, Mark, your bees are flying all over the place. What's going on? Well, they were swarming and then I wasn't there. So, but even if you're there, they might leave the hive, and instead of landing in a branch like at shoulder height, they may be in a branch that's 10 meters high in a tree, right? So what do? I mean, there are all kinds of imaginative ways to get those bees down. And I've seen a video where the person takes a shotgun and he shoots the branch between where the bees are and where the branch is connected to the main trunk, and the whole branch falls down and he catches the swarm that way, but the swarm I caught last summer was the first probably of 20 swarms in my lifetime, or 40, who knows what, in my beekeeping experience that I've ever been able to recuperate.
And can you place one swarm right beside the other hive, like if you have a hive there?
Yes, you can do that. Yeah, you can put several hives together at the same place. Although that's a good question. If you put it too close to the original hive, there might be a tendency of those bees to somehow go back to the original hive. So they might, get a bit confused in that regard. So it's better to put your new swarm several meters away from the original hive, if you know which one it was.
All right. Thank you.
So when they swarm, the entire hive is vacated, basically?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay. It's just the extra bees that don't fit anymore.
Yes, because the hive is splitting. They're not just moving from one hive to another, right?
Okay.
So we'll look at this. So when do they swarm? Usually they swarm earlier in the season, because a swarm is a dangerous thing, When in nature, bees, they live in their hive, maybe in a hole in the tree, and they got their wax, their comb, And inside the comb, they've accumulated pollen, they've accumulated honey, and all of a sudden, some of them leave to start up a new colony, and they have to find a new place to stay. So they're going to look for another hole somewhere in a tree. And once they get there, there's no wax, there's no honey, there's no pollen. So they have to go about building a whole new foundation for the hive. And making wax is very energetically taxing for bees. It takes a lot of work to make wax. And so wax in itself is a very valuable product for bees. So the bees that leave to start a new hive, they're taking a big risk. They're crossing their fingers, so to speak, that once they find a new place to make a hive, the weather will be good. There'll be a lot of nectar they can gather for several weeks so that they can make some comb in which the queen then can start laying eggs, because then she's got to lay eggs to make new workers to continue the hive, because those workers are dying quickly. So it's a big risk. In fact, I'm reading an excellent book right now, and a man studying wild honeybee colonies in upstate New York, and he says the chance of survival of swarms of wild swarms are 21%. 4 to 5 wild swarms don't make the first winter. So it's a big deal. That's why they swarm earlier in the season, because it gives them more time to build their wax and accumulate honey for the winter. So they swarm when conditions are good. The original hive should have a strong and high population and healthy, right? If a hive is a weak queen and is a low population, they're not likely going to swarm. They should have a lot of honey in the hive. Yes?
Yeah, so I wonder if the original queen of the hive goes with the swarm, or do they rear their own queen when they get where they're going, so to speak?
We'll talk about that, but what happens is when the conditions are good, they will rear a new queen. They will rear a new queen. Oops, someone is, here you go. Okay. When the conditions are good, they will rear a new queen, and the old queen is the one who will leave with 50, 60, or even 70% of the population of your hive. So that's what happens. So they'll do that when there's a lot of honey, because if there's a lot of honey, the ones who leave will, before leaving, the bees will just gorge themselves with honey. Their abdomens will double in size almost as they fill them up with honey, and then they will take off. So that helps them. When they find a new place to make a new colony, they're already going to have a lot of honey. They can regurgitate, they can make wax with, and start with the best amount of chances possible.
So while it's a natural thing, sorry to have cut someone off, while it's a natural thing to do, leave your hive in a rather compromised position by leaving only 20 to 30% of the bees left behind to get ready for winter, correct?
Correct. That's absolutely correct. So as a beekeeper, we're not talking about wild bees that do the thing. We're talking about the beekeeper who wants to have some honey that summer, So if I lose 50%, 60 or 70% of my workers, what's that going to do for my honey crop that year, right? Not good news. So that's one of the things a beekeeper will do to try to discourage the colonies from swarming. We'll be talking about that in a further lesson. Also, bees will swarm when there's a good nectar flow, lots of flowers out there. So here we go. How do they swarm? We're talking a lot of questions here. Swarming is an interesting phenomenon. So worker bees, when the conditions are right, as we just said, there's lots of honey, the population is going well, the season is nice, the worker bees will prepare a new queen, feeding several larvae a diet of royal jelly, which is a very rich mixture of pollen and honey that the bees will transform to a certain extent. And a few days before a new queen emerges from those queen cells, we saw those queen cells, the worker bees will stop feeding the old queen. She needs to be able to fly. And that you saw the size of that abdomen full of eggs, right? It's not good for flying. Typically, a queen like that, she won't fly very far at all. So they stop feeding her. She loses weight, and she stops laying eggs. That's why, as a beekeeper, when you open up a hive, you're looking for eggs and you don't see any. That's one of the questions you'll ask yourself is, no eggs. Is this colony getting ready to swarm? The queen will take flight, accompanied by up to 50%, or I've recently read that it could be up to 70% of worker bees. And before leaving, the bees will gorge themselves on honey. And the bees and the queen will alight outside the hive. It could be very close by, like in my case, it was just 3 or 4 meters away from the original hive, or it could be far away. You'll never see your bees again. Once they're there, there'll be scout bees. A couple of hundred of the bees are scouts. They're going to go look for a new place to establish a new hive. This book reading is, I read another book by the same author, Tom Seeley, and I'll tell you about him later. He's giving a talk on the 1st of February, online talk for free, and I'm going to be watching that. He wrote an entire book on how bees find a new place, a new colony, and how they communicate what they're finding to the swarm. The swarm could stay on a branch for 2 or 3 days as they wait for a decision to be made on where they're going to go. And the whole process of individual bees going out into the wilderness, looking around for holes in trees and in a house or somewhere, and then coming back to this group of 20, 30,000, 40,000 bees and telling them, hey, I've got a good place here. How do they convince those to go there? And this whole process is a fantastic one. And if you're really into beekeeping, I would recommend this book. So once they found a new home, the scout bees will lead them to their new colony. What happens to the original hive? Well, they get a new young queen, which is a good thing, but they lose a lot of their workforce. As a beekeeper too, you're always watching out for your queen. Is she healthy? Is she laying eggs? And one of the guys I was talking to, he was selling beekeeping equipment here in Ottawa last summer. He stopped doing it last summer though. And he said, that's my strategy. I let them swarm, I let them swarm. So I get a bit less honey, but you know what? I know I always have a young queen there who's laying well. Oh, in terms of beekeeping, that illustrates the fact that every beekeeper will have perhaps a different take on things, a different way of approaching the practice. There's no one single way of doing it. After you do it for a little while, you'll develop your own personal preferences. So an original hive may swarm once, twice, even 3 times during a season. So if your hive is swarming, colony is swarming twice, 3 times, you will not have honey that season. You won't have honey. So it's something to keep an eye on. And some bees, some strains, some queens, because of their genes, create colonies that tend to swarm more than others. So that's another interesting thing. When you're looking at bees, buying new queens, you'll ask the queen producers, some of them are more professional and dedicated than others. Are you selecting your queens for any particular characteristics? Are they swarming a lot? Are they gentle? Are they good honey? They get a lot of honey. A lot of the beekeepers are really into this. I'm not that sophisticated. Spend a lot of time trying to select bees for different characteristics like that, just like any livestock. Okay, that's the last slide for honeybee biology. We're moving along. You only have 18 minutes left. So I think I'll move on to the equipment. It's not so exciting, but it's important to know. But if you have any questions at this point in biology, I'm happy to take them. If not,
the link that you mentioned about the guy who's giving the talk online.
Yeah.
Do you have that link and can you send it out?
I'll send it to you. Yeah. I'll send it to you.
So ideally, do you want them to not swarm so you don't lose your queen and your honey?
That's right.
Swarming is because they feel crowded, is it not?
If your main objective is to maximize your honey harvest, you don't want your bees to be swarming.
Right.
Yeah. So if they never swarm, you're right. Your queen's going to get old, right? If you have the same queen year in, year out, she's going to get old. So at one point you're going to see maybe that there's a queen in there, but she's not laying many eggs, or she's not laying the eggs in a nice compact space. It might be a sign that it's time to change queens, and that's something a beekeeper could do as well. You find the queen, you kind of take her to the guillotine, so to speak, and then you replace her with a young queen that you can buy online, or not online, but you find someone locally who makes queens, and you go and meet up with this person and buy a queen from them.
Last question on the biology, if you don't mind.
Sure, not at all.
If in the event that you take your queen to the guillotine, or otherwise she's no longer there, will the hive itself rear a new queen for itself, or is it the beekeeper's responsibility to burnish one?
The hive will always, well, they generally replace their queens all the time if they feel they need to. But if your queen dies and you let the hive replace it themselves, you're going to have a month without any productivity there, because the queen will die. So the bees will notice that. They'll take an egg, because as I said, any worker egg could be turned into a queen. They'll raise queens. It takes, so there's maybe 2-3 days, before they realize it's time to raise a new queen. They're going to takes 18 days for that egg to turn into an adult queen. And then the adult queen emerges, so 1 or 2 days before she heads off on a mating flight. Watch out, she might die on her mating flight. She's very, very vulnerable out there flying around. Assuming she doesn't die, she comes back, she starts laying eggs. Worker bee takes 21 days to emerge from the egg. So you're looking at a month, easy a month of no worker bees emerging. So if you started with 50,000 bees, and the bees have a 35-day lifespan, so you can imagine by the time that month's over, you may be down to 20,000 bees or something like this. So by buying a queen bee that's already fertilized, you're going to circumvent all that. You can have, your queen dies, you put a new fertile queen in there right away, and she'll be laying eggs within days. So that's one of the strategies you use. But last summer I created 2 new hives, 2 new colonies, simply by taking some frames of eggs and larvae and bees and putting them in another box, but they had no queen. And those hives themselves raised their new queens. And I got 2 extra hives like that. They didn't produce much honey this last summer, but in the next summer I hope they will. We do have to move on. I'm concerned we're going to go overboard here. So we'll talk about equipment right now. We'll talk about hive components. Here I put pictures of hives. They're all the same thing, basically. But any difference you see in these hives is purely minor. This one here is a nice peaked roof, that's purely aesthetic, maybe the water drains better, but if your roof is waterproof in the first place, it's not a big deal. This one here, I don't know what those holes are, but maybe for aeration, but it's still another roof. Each one has their lower entrance. See down here, the entrance where the bees come in here. These 2, the middle one and the one on the right, have the landing boards. Practical, it's not absolutely necessary. So there you go. Let's have a look at each piece. As part of this course, I said you can get a discount if you buy a deluxe beginner's beekeeping kit. And that kit would include what you see here, all these pieces, just for your information. So this is the pieces of a hive. Number 1, down below, we call it the Hive Stand. And this one here has a bit of a landing board on it, not necessary. It's what you put the hive on, right? That could be a piece of wood like this. It could be a hive stand, could be some bricks you have, or whatever, an old pallet. I put some bees on pallets last summer. I really I might be doing more of that. To keep them off the ground so that they're not in humid grass and any ponds. Number 2, the bottom board, that is basically the floor, the hive floor. So whatever falls down from anywhere in here through the frames down to the bottom will end up on the bottom board, right? And the bees, when they fly in, the bottom board is where they land to get into the hive. And the picture we have here on the left, you see this piece of wood, that's a removable entrance reducer. We'll talk about that shortly, but they go through that, and then they can move up the hive and do what they have to do. Then we have an optional. Now, notice 2 and 2A here. These are interchangeable, one or the other, not both at the same time. So 2A is the same as a bottom board, but instead of a piece of wood, it's screen. So, by having a screen bottom board, it provides ventilation. In the summer, it's hot, it's good. It keeps the humidity down. It's easier for things to dry off. I like the screen bottom boards. I think 2 or 3 hives have them. And as time goes by and I need to replace bottom boards in the future, I will probably be buying screen ones. I'm not going to buy them now because the regular bottom boards are just fine. I'm not going to spend money for nothing and throw those out, but that's where I'll be moving towards, I think. What happens in the winter in the screen one, you don't want to have cold wind blowing up there. You can slip in a piece of rigid plastic corrugated cardboard kind of stuff beneath the screen to keep the air currents out. So number 3 is a hive body. This is the main piece of a hive. These are very versatile. You can have, as a beekeeper, you'll have at least 3 or 4 of these per hive once you get going. And they're used for either, you put the frames in there, and that's where the queen will lay her eggs. And it's also above here, these will be used for storing honey. So the one number 5 and number 3 is exactly the same thing, but number 5 is not quite as deep. So it contains In here, number 3 is serving as the brood box, because this is where the queen will lay her eggs. It contains 10 frames, these little slats that go across here, they're removable. And most beekeepers will use 2 of these for the brood boxes. They'll confine the queen to 2 brood boxes like this. That's enough space for the queen to lay a lot of eggs, for them to store honey and pollen, and enough to store honey and pollen to survive the winter. Okay, the next piece is a queen excluder, number 4. It's basically a screen with has a space exactly a certain amount, a certain size that allows the worker bees through, but not the queen bee. The queen bee being bigger, she can't fit through that space, whereas the worker bees can. Why don't you want the queen bee to go up any further? Because up above is where you want to store your honey. And the last thing you want when it's time to extract your honey is to extract it, and your honey is full of larvae and eggs and pupa. I mean, it probably makes for a more nutritious honey, you know, than just pure sugar. But it'll be harder to, you know, your neighbors, your family may not be less inclined to want to get some honey from you in that case. So that's a queen excluder. Some of them are made of plastic. I've got metal ones. Number 5 is, again, like number 3, it's a hive body. In this case, because it's above the queen's excluder, it's going to be used exclusively for storing honey. So the bees, when they're going to fill this with eggs and brood and some honey, and then when that going is good, there's lots of nectar, they're going to be bringing it above into your honey super. And then you have your inner cover, which basically you put it on top of your honey supers, and the bees will put propolis there. It's going to get stuck there. But and then above that, you put your outer cover, which keeps the rain from falling, the wetness from falling into your hive. So that's the basic elements of your beehive. If you look around, you'll drive in the countryside, you'll see beehives. That's what you'll see. There are different models of beehives, but 95% of beekeepers use this kind of hive. We talked about
screen bottom boards. Are screen bottom boards acceptable for overwintering as well?
Yes. As I said, in the winter, before the winter comes along, you can slide in a type of board underneath to keep the air current out. That's designed for that. So this is the queen excluder. That's the piece down below here, right? You see that? So you put that in for weak colonies. How it works is that you put it in, it blocks the entrance, except for a little hole. Or if you flip it over 90 degrees, the hole will be bigger. You understand that? You can do that mental flip. You use that when your colony is weak. It helps that colony protect itself from other bees that might want to come in and rob the honey. Or you put it in the winter as well to reduce the airflow coming into your hive. So I talked about frames. These brood boxes or the honey supers will have 10 frames. So that's what they look like here. It's basically a wooden frame, like a picture frame, but instead of a picture, you have what we call a foundation. It could be wax, and more often than not these days, it's plastic with a bit of wax on it, and they've been embossed with hexagons, little hexagons, exactly the same size as what the bees will use for drying out their comb. And so that's another picture of the brand new, clean frame with bare foundation. So when you buy a starter kit, you'll be getting 10 of these for every box that you have. Here's a quick little video of this man who just kind of just a little over a minute, he shows you how these things work. Let's, because you know, I can talk about it and show you pictures, but I feel if you have a little video with a person showing the pieces one by one, it'll be easier to understand. Oh, it's 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Dave. Today we're going to be talking about the basic components of a hive. So here I've got the bottom board. As you can see, we've got these connected just by some large staples, just so it makes it easier to transport them together. So the bottom board, the bees go in here to get to the hive. And here is what's called an entrance reducer. You've got a couple options that kind of determine how big the entrance is for your bees to get through. So that just goes down in here. And inside, this is a deep super. So you've got your deep super, your bottom board, entrance reducer. And inside your deep super, you've got your frames. And these will be covered with wax for the bees to build out comb on. There's 10 frames per each box here. On top of your deep super, you can put a queen excluder when you don't want the queen to get up and lay brood in your honey box. So the worker bees can get through this, but the queen can't. Then, on top of that, we can put another deep super. Again, 10 frames in there. And on top of that, you will put your inner cover and your outer cover. All this is painted just to protect it from the weather, make it last a little bit longer, look a little nicer.
I think that's enough, because that's what I wanted to show you, how these things fit together. His you can see his outer cover is completely different from the kind I use. There's no metal protected on top, so I guess it would wear more. Maybe he lives, this guy sounds like maybe he's from the States, maybe he lives in a nice dry area, he doesn't have to worry about rain too much, but that just goes to show you, how a hive is set up. So I'll take it to the next slide here, whoops.
Hi.
Oops, here we go. Okay, that was the woodenware. And now we'll talk about all the little paraphernalia that goes with the beekeeper outfit, right? You have a smoker. So the smoke will distract the bees and send them scurrying away and make it easier to work the hive. Sometimes you open up the hive, there's lots of bees. Then you want to see eggs, you can't see, they're covered with bees. So a bit of smoke and they're going to move aside. You can see the eggs are there. Smokers are a frustrating little thing. You have to learn how to start them up and have so that they keep on going, so they don't go out just when you need them. It took me many years to figure that one out, but I finally decided that what I do now is I take some little pieces of wood and I soak them in oil. No, I take a pine cone and soak it in oil. I keep it at the beginning of the summer, I do that. And then I put one in the bottom and I put maybe a briquette in there, and then I put lots of pine needles and branches and sticks. And usually that helps keep it going for an hour or so.
When you say oil, do you mean like gasoline oil or like cooking oil?
Everybody has their own little trick, right? Yeah, like motor oil, some used motor oil. I just have a little coffee can with that stuff in there, and I just throw a few pine cones in there. Some people use, they said the sumac fruit, the fuzzy red fruit of the sumac tree. They say that burns nice and slowly and consistently. So you have to experiment with what works best for you. You'll be getting a bee suit and gloves. You'll see lots of pictures of beekeepers without any suit whatsoever. They're so brave, and they get stung. Of course, they never tell you, but they get stung. And if you're just opening up your hive on a nice sunny day, looking on the top and not digging into it, 9 times out of 10 they'll never bother you, the bees. But it all depends on your willingness to be stung over time. And there's a Hive Tool, a very versatile tool to pry open boxes, scrape away wax, destroying queen cells if you don't want them. Those are basically the elements of what you'll be, of a beekeeper's, kit. So that's basically it for session 1. It's 5:58. The timing is pretty good here. But before you go, you all have to be able to pass this test. Are you ready? Okay, find the queen. You got 10 seconds. No, this is a joke. This is a joke. I don't even think there's a queen in that picture, so don't get too anxious. But this is typically what you see when you pull out a frame. This is not a deep frame. This is a medium frame from a brood chamber. This is from a brood chamber. I could tell because you see some capped brood. That is capped brood cells right there. And these are probably all nurse bees. They're all attending to the brood frame. Whoops. And just a quick observations here. There's a bit of what you call Bur Comb. The bees have made extra comb in places where it's not very practical. And so if you're a meticulous beekeeper, you might want to scrape that off from time to time. Don't let it get out of hand. I see here on the edges, there's a lot of sticky, gooey stuff here on both sides. That's Propolis. So that's we'll talk about that. That's a type of gum. The bees gather resin from trees and they use it to plug holes and stick things together. It can make your life as a beekeeper difficult if that particular colony has a tendency to use a lot of propolis. Some do, some don't. So that's a nice picture there. Nice frame. The beekeeper has no gloves on, so we're very happy. So and so what people do to spot their queen is they put they'll capture her and put a dot of paint on her thorax. And there's a protocol that according to the year, the color changes. It is a standard that, so that allows you to see how old the queen is. So yellow might mean she was born in 2017 or whatever. This is a 4-year-old queen this year, right? So maybe you want to replace her. This queen has no color, so they're difficult to spot. I don't do that. I never even really worry about spotting my queens. I just look for eggs. If I see eggs and I think, all right, I got eggs, I got a queen. You know, at least I had one maximum 3 days ago, and that's good enough for me because it can be hard to find a queen. And to find her, you do have to go through every frame. You might have to go through every frame, and that disturbs the bees a lot if you're going through every frame on a regular basis. So here we have a queen. Look at the difference though. Here she's got a nice golden abdomen. And this one here has a stripe black and yellow, right? So it goes to show you that the bees have different genetics and they'll have different characteristics. So that's a good example of that. So I try to give you some additional resources, homework if you want, totally voluntary, just to give you some ideas. I go through some videos. I try to find some that are relevant to the course, the lesson we just covered, and that I find are particularly good and not too long. So the University of Guelph, you'll find they have an excellent collection of videos. If you watch them all, you don't have to take this course anymore. Hive Components, the clothing, bee stings, right? You know, people worry about, you know, you have to be worried about bee stings. So it's good to learn about them. The casts. And here, this last particular URL, I just added it tonight before this class. The nuke sellers of Eastern Ontario. See, I didn't even check my typo. That's terrible. If any of you are keen on starting beekeeping this year, it's time now to order your nukes. So I put together this map of people who sell nukes. Nukes are like a starter hive, a starter kit. Yes, bees, they're bees basically. You buy a box of bees and you put it in your hive. And this time of year, people are starting to order them for the spring or May or June. So you might want to open that particular link and see if there's a nuke seller near you, contact them and say, let them know, listen, I'm thinking of starting in the spring. You still have some for sale, how much or whatever, and start that conversation. So any questions on that? And so the next class will be this Thursday at 5 p.m. And that will be the end of this class. I'm stopping the recording. I'll see you all on Thursday.